So I just retired from the Washington Post in the end of after 46 and a half years, no, 45 and a half years. I was the second longest tenured photographer. Arthur Ellis was there for 47 years. He started in 1930 and he left just as I came on board, but he remained a friend until he died. And you'll see a picture of him in here. One reason why I want to come here is because I owe Loudoun County everything I have. If it wasn't for this beautiful landscape, I wouldn't have been able to make a beautiful portfolio to present to the Washington Post. Farmers in this county, it was all farming. And, you know, their resource was the soil, pulling the minerals out of the soil to give them the plants and to feed the animals. My resource was the landscape and the people. And I mined it, and my tool was a camera. And I was lucky enough I was on the yearbook at the high school and met a new reporter. They were reporter photographers for the weekly paper, the Loudoun Times-Mirror. His name was John Emig. He'd just come from California. And I met him my sophomore year in high school. He was out photographing and reporting on the practice for the upcoming football season for the Valley High School. And I said, hey, can I take pictures for you guys? He said, sure. And so I started selling pictures, $5 a picture to them. And then by the time I was in the 11th grade, I was pretty much their staff photographer. And what I realized looking back on all that is that I was actually given a newspaper. And if you know, most of you remember, the Times-Mirror was a pretty nice publication back then. I was given a newspaper when I was in high school to do anything I wanted to do with it. It was all up to me to fill that thing up with pictures. So let's start the journey here. This was Loudoun County back then. And what you're looking at is, you know, McCormick Farm All tractor, probably purchased in the mid to late 40s. And a lot of farms this was shot in 1977. But a lot of farms back then really were kind of state of the art in 1940. And all I would do is I'd just drive around. I probably put well over 100,000 miles on a car. So I was driving around Loudoun County. I know every single farm and back road here. And anytime I saw a farmer anywhere, I'd just pull into it and say, hey, can I hang out with you for a while and make pictures? And then I'd publish all those in the paper that week. It was a weekly newspaper, so it gave me plenty of time to just go out and gather and explore. And then I would go back to the office every day and just develop. And by developing your pictures every day, you learn from your mistakes. And it just was a great learning process. But I mean, I would work almost 24/7. I'd sleep on the newsroom floor a lot of times. And I would go over to a friend's house, like the picture framer Bill Waller in Leesburg. I'd probably go to his house and get a shower or something like that. This is, you know, there's a lot of, it's horse country over in the Middleburg area, and this is a point-to-point race. Forgive the line up top. We can't get rid of that. We've been trying to all morning here. So that's going to interrupt some pictures, but this is called the Rokeby Bowl. It's part of the Upperville races. And I shot this when I was a senior in high school. And I figured that I would just try to put a remote camera under there. And I had I just purchased a motor drive for my Nikon F. You know, which, you know, the F was about $350 and the motor drive was about $350. This is 1975. So it was like $700. And to do a remote cord, I went to Nichols Hardware and bought a couple of extension cords and a doorbell button and soldered the doorbell button onto the cord. And then, you know, I pre-focused on where I saw the hoof prints. And then when they came over, I fired. And, you know, I've tried that many times since and have never equaled it. This is now a parking lot for the giant food store in Percival, but this was Cochran's Pumpkins Patch. And this was a picture I made when I was in the 10th grade. And it was one of the first non-sports pictures I brought to the Times-Mirror, and it's pretty special to me. This is a Norman Rockwell painting of a county newspaper in Missouri. And when I saw it, it is exactly the way the Times-Mirror was when I first went to work there. Exactly. You can see the editor, gray hair, sitting at the typewriter. That would have been Jim Birchfield, my editor. And the young lady over in the left would have been Linda DeButz, who did all the farm reporting. But it is exactly what the front desk, when you came in, looked like. The newsroom was really over on the other side, but it's very, very similar. Yes, it is. Once again, this is at a friend's house. This is actually Bill Waller's house in Luckett's, the framer. And this was his first wife, Ellen. And this is Bill's workshop. And I would go over there a lot to get meals. And Ellen was out repainting his workshop. I also, at the Times-Mirror, I would be a stringer for the United Press International Wire. And this is one picture I submitted, and this ran all over the country. This is also on Bill's land. This is a tractor shed during a blizzard. And it's you can see the snowdrift down below and then the slanted roof of the shed up above. And we would publish these pictures. Probably just ran on the front page. I mean, this was the beauty of this newspaper. Anything I went out and found, the editors, I had two editors. Brett Phillips was the original editor, who was a tough guy and you know, ignored you. And then finally he'd get around to like you and became your best friend. And then when Brett, back in the 70s, everybody said, I'm going to Colorado. And Brett decided to go to Colorado. And when he left, that's when Jim Birchfield took over. And both of them were photography nuts and loved photography. So it was really great to have these two editors who thought everything of photography. There's times you have editors at papers that don't know a thing or could care less about photography. So that was, without them, you know, I probably would have been just kind of pushed aside. Instead, both of them absolutely just played everything to its hilt. This is across the street from the Loudoun Times-Mirror. It's, you know, a very picturesque place to grow up. And during a snowstorm, after a snowstorm, but everywhere you looked was a pretty picture, the courthouse square. This is Mrs. Marconis, who ran the theater in Percival. And I just talked to her grandson. Well, I know several of her grandsons. I went to school with them, but actually, she was actually quite a good friend. When you mention her name to a lot of people, they kind of cringed because she would walk around the theater with her flashlight shining on people kissing and everything. And but I got to know her very well because I used to run her projectors every now and then with her grandson. Michael would invite me up to run them, and then occasionally, when she had nobody else, she'd give me a call and I'd run the projectors at the Marconis Theater. She came to this country in 1914 at 10 years old from Transylvania. She fled the war, the Great War, and talking to her grandson the other day, she's from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which no longer exists. It got dissolved in World War I, and she's part of the royal family. She's a duchess. Wow. And came here with nothing, and she and her husband came to Percival in 1933 and built very successful businesses, the theater, a restaurant, and her sons produced the oil company, the Marconis Oil Company, that delivered heating oil. Really amazing woman. This is Scott Brownell. Some of us know him. He Bluemont. This is the Bluemont Country Store. And I don't know who the fellow is next to him, but this is a story I was doing was Rachel? Is that her name? There you are. You just There you go. And you just bought the Bluemont store. So I was going over to do a feature story on how you just bought the Bluemont store. I walk in there and there's a former classmate, Scott Brownell. But what's really good about this is what a lot of people coming off the farm look like. I lived on a farm for a while and baled hay, and you'd always stop at a country store and buy a bottle of pop, and it was always in a, well, Lucy Janney, you're here, you know, the Lincoln store, and you know, the cooler with the cold water, and you'd reach in and get that bottle of pop. But also shows that, you know, I mean, Scott's really dressed to be working outside right there, you know, hard work too. This is Mr. Peyton's garage in Hamilton. And did you know him, Sonny? Okay. But he, you know, I would always drive by, and one day I just decided to stop and walk in and see what he was up to, and did a whole photo page on him, repairing, you know, how he ran his garage. Yep, this pipe, yeah. I'm sure there's probably gas dripping down, but you know, OSHA wasn't around, you know, or they were maybe a year old when I took this picture. Scott Douglas, the coach of Loudoun Valley High School. This is his first district championship. His teams were always good, and every time he had a great team, some big old high school with a lot of kids would just have a few less kids, and they would come down from the big district into the little district with these massive teams and always make us second place. But he finally broke through and won his first district championship. And I put a camera up on a pole with the remote again, just held it up like this as he was cutting down the nets. The other thing is that back then, the team lifted you up, everybody up to cut the nets. And then you go to any tournament, probably since the 80s, they bring out a step ladder and everybody has to climb up this because the insurance industry insisted that nobody be riding on anybody's shoulders. And now it's the most sterile event you can possibly think of. But back when you would put people up on their shoulders, amazing stuff. But this is what lawyers will do. Right, David? All right, so hopefully somebody can identify this kid. This is the bicentennial parade in Lovettsville in 1976. And this is shot just down the street. And this young child, I got his name. It's, you know, I can look it up in the paper, but I would love to find him again. I think the gate and the fence is still there, and I'd love to photograph him 50 years later, standing at that gate. But 1976 bicentennial parade. Another 76 bicentennial parade. Leesburg, this is the Fry twins. They're watching the parade there. This is across the street in the courthouse square, and it was for the Memorial Day ceremony. And there's always a good rule for photographers to arrive early and leave, be the first to arrive and be the last to leave. And I was first to arrive, and so was she. And that's, you know, if I'd gone there when it was scheduled, I wouldn't have gotten a picture like this. Here's a farmer rounding up the stray cows. I think he's rounding them up. I can't quite remember. It's out on 704. Normally cows just find their way in for the milking. You don't really have to round them up, but you know, I saw him out in the field, pulled over, went up and started talking to him, and spent the afternoon with him milking the cow, you know, watching milk his cows and everything. This is the planting of an orchard for Sleater's orchards, the apple orchards. And once again, just driving around, saw him planting the orchard and pulled over, and the photo did a picture page of him doing it. That's now the intersection of the old Route 7 and the new Route 7 coming into Loudoun County. I mean, it's, you know, all gone. And so now we're going to transition a bit here. We're going to see two color pictures that I shot from a helicopter in 2010. So you saw what the landscape was like. And this is Percival in 2010. That's the coal farm right there, which is now a shopping center. Yeah. And the house, they actually incorporated the house and the silos and things into the shopping center. But it just kind of shows the development that ate up most of the farmland. And now we'll go out to Lincoln. This is 2010. It's still there. The very last dairy farm, the Potts Farm, which is still the functioning dairy farm in Loudoun County, and it's still there. But you can see the encroachment of the houses and everything. So we're going to our firemen. That kept me busy all the time. I had a scanner at home, and we had scanners in the office, and it seemed like most of the fires were at nighttime, and mostly at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. This is 3 o'clock in the morning right here. It's in Leesburg, outside of Leesburg. It's and the fellow died in the fire. In the doorway, you can see the fireman is standing over the body, and the fire marshal would always, I was like, there might have been 2 or 3 photographers in all the counties. Howard Allen over in Middleburg, but he was primarily had an incredible business just catering to all the wealth over there. There was a part-time photographer that shot weddings, the Wedding Bell, and then in Percival was Hugh Grubb, who was the first guy to really teach me photography. He was the postmaster in Percival. And Hugh shot, gatherings and weddings also. But for the most part, I was it. And the fire marshal would always grab me and help, have him he'd have me shoot a roll of evidence for him. So, I mean, not too long afterwards, I had to go in there and make a picture of the body and everything. And I think I was like maybe 18 years old then, something like that. This is Mike Marconis, the grandson of Mrs. Marconis. And this is he's just graduated from being a sophomore in high school and going to be a junior in high school, and I'm going to be a senior. So here he is, the lead man on this. There was a furniture store in Percival that burned, and it was close to my house, and the alarm went off. And I went out on my front porch and I saw this black smoke, incredibly thick black smoke rising in the sky. And from that, you learn if it's really thick black smoke, it's bad. And so I just went running down there with my camera, and this is right in the entrance of the store. This might even be out on the curb. And I think it is. So he's not wearing an air pack or anything. I think it's the curb right there. And, there were a lot of people that were very young that were firemen. I mean, they're 15, 14 years old. I mean, this just says that he's the lead guy right there right now, because he was one of the first to respond to this from Hamilton. Leesburg fire, and these 2 firemen are suffering from heat stroke, heat exhaustion. And this little girl comes over and just checking them out. But when I look at this picture, I think these guys didn't go to the hospital or anything like that. They just kind of, these days, they'd be hooked up to an IV and probably sent to the hospital for heat exhaustion, heat stroke. But you didn't do things like that back then. This is the first thing I saw when the Lovettsville Community Center started burned down about 1 in the morning. Fred, what year was that, do you think? 70. What, 77? 76, something, but it was about 1 in the morning, and I had a scanner in my bedroom, and so I immediately, and the other thing is bad fire, they start calling several different companies. If they call one company, you just wait and see what they report once they get there, but they started calling a lot of companies for this. It was arson, and the place was really burning. And when I left Percival, heading here to Lovettsville, once you get outside the town, everything's completely dark. And once I left Percival, I can just still remember the entire sky was orange from the ground up. It was the most amazing thing. And, it was massive, but to see the sky all lit up like that was really something. And you're heading out there and go, oh my God, this is big. So this is one of the first pictures I made, and then I made my way to the front lawn. I'm working. Then it's the airliner crash, which is just coming in just a couple more weeks will be exactly 50 years. TWA 727 with 92 people crashed into the Mount Weather. And what you see in that picture, the part that's burning in the center, that's the front section fuselage where the pilots are and everything. And they could, this is made about an hour after the call went out. I got up there. And they're just now on the right, you can see them just now at chainsaws trying to clear the road off. But it's the investigation found that there was a misinterpretation between the pilots and the air traffic controller and what the air traffic controller meant on clear for approach. And they were supposed to go to National Airport, but they were diverted to Dulles, and the weather was so bad. It was some of the worst weather I've ever been in. When I drove up there with John Emig, who was the reporter, we were both at the Times-Mirror that morning. It was a Sunday morning. And we, I remember coming into past Round Hill, we couldn't even see the end of the hood of our car, of the car we were driving. You couldn't see anything. And they thought they were on final approach for the airport for Dulles, and then they started, when you read the transcripts from the cockpit, they start discussing among themselves. They said, well, we haven't come to Round Hill yet, and Round Hill's at 1,700 feet, and we're at 1,500 feet. What's that all about? And then they start deciding, and they said, well, maybe we better, and then it ends. And so when I got there, I immediately made that picture, and I immediately went running up into the area where the rest of the plane was. Just as you can see, this was one of the biggest pieces I saw. There were a few. The tail section was probably the biggest piece. I never got down to see that part of it, but when I walked up there, all I felt on my feet was a crunch, 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 and I looked down. And I thought it was crisp leaves in the fall, but it was the skin of the plane is shredded, aluminum skin is shredded into pieces the size of my hand. And it was like leaves covering the ground. And it's just this crunch, crunch, crunch. And they got to a point where they just cleared us all out back onto the road. I was the only photographer up there at the time. And so standing at the road, if you just turned around and looked, this is the path the plane took. It doesn't quite show it as well enough, but it was truly like a lawnmower. It'd come right through and clip the grass. It was just clean and just right up to the road, where it just went right up to the road. The belly must have scraped the bottom road, and the cockpit slammed into the rock right there. Then once they started clearing all the trees out, then they just started clearing some of the debris out, but that's still the cockpit over there and on the left-hand side still burning. And they kept on dousing it, and it kept on lighting back on the fire. I mean, it's just, they could never put it out for as long as I was up there. And it was one of the most miserable days of my life. I mean, the weather was like 32.5 degrees and pouring rain. And at times it was snowing. So I believe Brett Phillips was the editor then. He was up there, and he finally says, come on, let me get you back to the office. John will stay up here. We got to start developing film and get things ready. And the wire services were calling, and they were looking for pictures. So he drove me back down, and he goes, well, you're not going to school this week. He goes, you count on that. He goes, you're coming in tomorrow, you do the rest of the film, and says the first clear day, he goes, I want you to go out to Godfrey Field and rent an airplane. And he goes, I want aerials of this. So I went over, well, actually, here they are getting they took them a long time to even think about getting the bodies out, because they didn't have any place to put them. they finally put everything. They set up a morgue in the Bluemont Community Center, and what they did was they turned off all the heat in the building and set up tables and things. And my friend Bob Oyen, his mother was the head of the health department. She ran the whole thing, and she would come home every day. I was over at his house, and she would be very grim as she came home every day. But Brett Phillips told me, he says, just forget going to school. And he says, first clear day, get an airplane. And I flew over the site, and it snowed the first night. And the snow had, covered everything, but we could see the two trails that the recovery people took on each side of the crash site. You can see how it crossed over the road and hit and shattered everywhere. The other thing about that is, one thing I learned that day was sometimes when planes crash and they say crashed in a mountain and we can't find it yet. It was even though I know exactly where this was, it was very hard to spot the site. We were looking forever to find it. So it's easy for these things to get lost. More aviation. Dulles Airport's in Loudoun County, and the Concords were, a lot of people weren't happy about the Concords coming for environmental and sound reasons. And it's 1976, and so the United States government allowed the British Airways and Air France to do a 1-year trial period to see how everything worked with the Concords. And they made these 2 initial landings, both in New York Kennedy and at Dulles. So I went out and covered the arrival of the British and the French Concorde at the Dulles Airport. And they took you out to the side of the runway, and you made pictures of it landing. Then they brought you over to where people were getting off. And then they had this big reception afterwards indoors, and you can see the 2 Concords lined up. So after a year of this, in 1977, the United States government said, yeah, they can come in now. They've cleared their 1-year trial. So I called up, I knew the fellow running Dulles Airport. You know everybody in this town. And so I called him, I said, look, can you take, the Concorde's been cleared, so I need a picture. I said, drive me out to the end of the runway and drop me off. I said, I want to lay down and I want to shoot this thing coming over me. So he took me out there 3 hours before, and I just waited. And finally it came in as it started raining. But no. It's amazing. It's amazing what you can do when you know somebody. And the reason why I know him is because his son was on the track and field for Broad Run High School, and he would I'd have his pictures in the paper every now and then because he was good, and I'd see the father. I see him out there all the time. We'd get to talking about stuff. So he gave me carte blanche at the airport. Okay, so we're moving on. I knew one of the photographers at the Washington Post. Her name was Linda Wheeler, and she did all the regional sections of the paper. And so she covered Loudoun County and all the outer counties, and she would come out occasionally. I'd see her, we'd get lunch. And she also subscribed to the Times-Mirror. And one day I get a call in like April, and she says, hey, it's Linda Wheeler. I'm going on sabbatical for a year. They need a replacement. I'm going to recommend you. So I took my portfolio in. I met Matthew Lewis, who was the department head. And he brought me on for a year, just a year temporary job. And what happened was 2 people retired right away. And by August, this was June 78. By August, they put me on the staff. Now I was 21 years old. So this is kind of broken up into different sections. This is in those early days, you covered everything. You might be in the White House during the morning and doing a food assignment or something in the afternoon. But this is Jimmy Carter's State of the Union address in 1979. and that's Walter Mondale and Tip O'Neill in the back. And I covered 3 presidents. I did bits of Carter over his years. I did a lot of Reagan, and I did just a tiny bit of George Bush, but I did photograph, I think a total of 10 presidents in my life. 2 of them were retired, Nixon and Ford. And after the first George Bush, I would always photograph the inauguration. So they were president then, and I count that as photographing these presidents. So a total of 10 and 8 active presidents and 12 inaugurations. So did Carter. I did Ronald Reagan's campaign in 1980. And this is in the battleground of Michigan, of all places. This is the governor of Michigan. His name's Milliken, and it's in Lansing, Michigan. And you know, you're just barnstorming with him, just going city to city, all across the states he needed the votes the most. And then he became president. And during the inauguration parade, they had these trucks that travel right in front of the car, the car of the president. Oops, sorry, Gerald Ford. That's also on campaign. That's at his opening, the laying of the stone at his library in Grand Rapids. I believe he's from Grand Rapids. So there's Ford. There's Lincoln. I mean, sorry, that's not Lincoln. Sorry, I'm a Ford, not a Lincoln, he said. That's Reagan there during the inaugural parade, and he's up through the roof of a limousine. But they put you on these trucks, and you just crammed in with a bunch of photographers and TV people. And this was probably the best of the best I got of that. Right. So then George Bush. Now this is interesting. So I occasionally came across Bush when he was vice president. And so there's this one crazy assignment I went to where it was for the style section. And I think it's coming up next, I hope, but we got to get a picture of Bush playing tennis with Alexander Haig, the Secretary of State. So I get there and it's just the 3 of us. And, and so I'm, get a picture of the 2 of them together. And then Bush drops trowel right in front of me. And, it's like, this guy just doesn't care about anything. He's just the most casual guy you will ever run across. It's unbelievable. And it's just like the 3 of us. And then here he is as president. And this was the last day I ever covered the White House. By that time, the Post had put me in the sports section, but I was finishing up my month as covering the White House. And he's going out to the helicopter with his dog, Millie, to go to Camp David, and it's pouring rain. So let's see, we're going to transition to general assignment. So the first 2 years I was general assignment, which included White House and Congress. You'll see pictures it'll kind of be through the decades. So, but this is probably about 1979, 80. And this is Fletcher's Boathouse near Chain Bridge area of Washington. And a lot of times they would need aerial photographs, and they'd rent you a helicopter. You got the National, pick up a helicopter, and you would shoot what you needed to shoot for the assignment. And then you would take the helicopter and fly around looking for features. And on the way back, I spotted this going on with the lighting and everything, and had them circle for a while. This is the farmers came to town, I believe in 1979, with the tractorcade and the farmer protests. And there were, thousands and thousands of tractors in town. And part of the protest, what do you think that is? A Model B, Fred? Come on, you're not John. You're not John. Green blood doesn't flow in your veins. I think it's it's a John Deere, and it's probably a Model B. And of course, this tractor's from the 1940s 40s or 30s, but they set it ablaze. And this is over at Bill Waller's house again. I was at the Post and having dinner. This is out in Luckett's, and we're eating outside. And I always have my camera with me, and I made a few pictures of their new cat. And I went back to the Post and I shot a bunch of assignments and developed that film and looked at it, and threw it away, threw it on the light table. And Linda Wheeler came by and said, "Oh my God, somebody shot a great cat picture here." I said, "Oh, that thing." I said, "She goes, oh man, it's amazing." I said, "Nah, it's just another stupid cat picture." And she said, "No, this is great. I'm going to print it up for you. And I'm going to submit it." And it ran on the front of Metro. And it's the most requests for photographs the Post had ever had until they got barraged with print orders. And until about 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, we had 4 presidents standing in a line in a row. And that was the only thing that beat it out in sales. Tells you everything, doesn't it? And the old timers, let me tell you something, kid. He goes, the only thing that counts here as a news photographer is the 3 Ks: kids, cats, and canines. So the Pope came to visit in 1979, John Paul II, and he was giving a mass at the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception on a Sunday, and it's in October '79. I photographed him doing mass, and he was done. He went off, he's disappeared, and so packed up. And I walk out that door up there, and I see all these people, and I go, oh, and I turn around, and he and I slam into each other. And I go, so I go down in front of him, down the steps the whole way, all the way to the car, and then he gets in the car, and I go around the other side so I see the crowd, and he gets out of there at the top of a limousine. He's turning around and waving to the crowd, and then he finally, I'm yelling, but he finally turns around and waves to me. And this is pictures made by just holding the camera over the head. And that technique for press photographers is called a Hail Mary. This is Bishop McCullough in Washington, D.C., and this is his baptismal pool that his church just built, and he was baptizing 1,200 people that day. And up until this point, the way he would baptize his people was with a fire hose out on the street. So this was just amazing, just jam-packed, and they also invited church bands from all up and down the East Coast. So bands are playing left and right, and when one band stopped, another band would start, and it just went on for hours like this. This is when Thurgood Marshall retired from the Supreme Court. He held a press conference, an announcement in a press conference in the second floor room at the Supreme Court. And they called me as a second, I think they called Lucian Perkins to do it. And then all of a sudden I get a call, get over to the Supreme Court. All the photographers are in the front row. There was no room in the room at all. It was completely packed. And I found this one little corner over on the side, and was just lucky to squeeze in there. It turned out I had the best angle. And when Marshall saw the picture in the paper, he called me up from his car phone, and he answered the phone. He goes, "Hey, John, this is Thurgood Marshall. Let me tell you something. That was one hell of a picture you got of me." And he said, "I really would love a copy." I said, "Oh, I'd be glad to get you one." He goes, "I won't accept it from you if you don't sign it for me." I said, "Well, that'd be fine." And then he goes, I'll sign, you sign one for me. So I got the prints made up, 60 by 20s, and went to visit him in his office, and realized that very few people go to a Supreme Court justice office. And he was, he was so excited about the picture, and he called his secretary when he got it. He goes, "Hey, Louise, get in here." And he goes, He goes, what do you think? He goes, I know just where I'm gonna hang it. I'm gonna hang it in my basement above the bar. All right, so, unfortunately, these are it's 2000 or 1999 to 2000, I think the Target stores actually paid for this, the cleaning of the Washington Monument. It required scaffolding up, and this is just as they're finishing up the, uh, the top scaffolding. They're standing on the very top of the Washington Monument. So I shot it with a telephoto lens, a big telephoto lens, but they've done this several times before. 1934 was the first. I believe like 1964 was the second time, and this was the third time they did it. And so in 1934, Arthur Ellis that's Arthur Ellis right there. And there he is at the very top of the Washington Monument with a speed graphic on the point. And he's balancing his camera on one of the most exotic metals that was ever produced in this country in 1888. It was called aluminum. And that's what it is. It's an aluminum cap, but it was so exotic back then. It was like gold. The Post sent me my first year there to do a profile of the Western United States. And by far the most interesting place I ended up was probably Butte, Montana, which was just this rough and tumble mining town. I mean, really rough and tumble. And the main thing they had was this giant open pit copper mine called the Berkeley Pit. But you can see the remnants of the old mines. These are called gallows heads, where they used to go down in the ground to mine the copper. And I came across this one miner's house with his long johns hanging out. And there you go. Now this is me with a portable darkroom. I got a couple wire guys here who've done this over the years. You have a darkroom and a suitcase, and this is during you can see me reflected in the mirror. You take a bathroom in your hotel room and you trash it. And there's an enlarger over on the right. And this is during the 3 Mile Island nuclear disaster. And this is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Frank Johnston and I were up there. I brought the darkroom, and we would develop our pictures in our film and pictures in the bathroom. And we had a drum transmitter, which I'll show you later. Took 8 minutes to transmit a picture over the telephone. And you had to hook the transmitter in the wall, the hotel. In order to do that, you had to violate every contract with the Bell Telephone Company, because you weren't allowed to unscrew that box and pull out the wires, but we did it. Another trip I took, I was in sports at the time. This is 1988, the winter of 1988, between Christmas and New Year's. I was sent down to do the national championship football game in Arizona, Phoenix, and they gave me a week to just hang out and shoot the practices and everything. And I get a phone call, and the editor says, "Hey, you're out west, aren't you?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Could you run up to Yellowstone for a couple of days?" He goes, "We're doing a big piece on Yellowstone after the fire in the winter." And I said, "Sure, I got time." And so I got a flight up to Bozeman, Montana, and it was a blizzard when I got there. I had actually packed a bunch of winter clothes, because after being in Phoenix, I was going to go up to Monument Valley, which was very cold. So I had everything I needed except boots. And I stopped in Bozeman and bought a pair of sorrel boots, and then drove into the top entrance of Yellowstone, Mammoth, I believe it was called. Stayed at the lodge, and then rented a snowmobile the next day. And for 2 days, I think I drove about 200 miles alone through Yellowstone. But what they told, and in blizzards and everything. But what they told me was, you come across a buffalo, he goes, that thing could kill you. He goes, just give it a lot of room. Just don't provoke it. And it says it's really running on low energy, but it'll have enough energy to kill you. And then by doing so, it will run out of its own energy and probably die also. So I see it, this is a road, you know, it's all covered with snow. It's in a blizzard and I see it coming at me and I just stand up on the snowmobile with my camera and start shooting a sequence of pictures. And I'm doing this, I'm thinking, boy, this guy doesn't see me. And so then I stop making the picture and I start waving my arm, hey, he starts saying, and he stops. And oops, sorry. And so he stops. And we had this standoff for about 15 minutes. And I just keep on talking to him and talking to him. And finally, he just decides to go off the road. And so then I went, you know, after 2 days, I went back to the airport. I was 2 full days in the park, went back to the airport, flew back down to Phoenix, went to the Arizona State University darkroom, developed all my film, transmit all those pictures, and the next day I covered the national championship game. All right, so this is what I did during 9/11. The day of 9/11, all I did was hang out at the local hospitals. But the second day, they had this, the Pentagon was still burning, and they had this one area where the press could be that was a half-mile away from the Pentagon. And I had all my big telephoto lenses, and this is the equivalent of like a 1200 millimeter lens. And once they put the fire out, the firemen went and draped this flag over the Pentagon. And then this is what it looked like once the flag was down. And then a year later, for the 1-year anniversary, they sent me up to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where the flight, the United Airlines Flight 93, I believe, was crashed. And I have the names here of, let's see. I'm trying to see who this, United, so they had a ceremony for everybody died and said, you know, we really should build a monument here. This is the forgotten site. And I understand the site is now complete and beautiful. But after the ceremony was over, I was walking up the road and the bus with all the relatives went by me. But as the bus passed, I saw this woman walking up and everybody was hugging her. And so I went down and started photographing her, and she is Alice Hoagland, and her son is a guy named Mark Bingham, who was one of the people who, like 5 people got together to organize to try to take over the plane again. And so this is a picture I got. And once again, it's a typical thing. The entire ceremony had been over for at least a half an hour. Sometimes your pictures are, you know, go early and stay late. And a lot of luck involved also. It seems like you got to carry luck with you everywhere you go. Just this is over in Arlington Cemetery. Over the years, I've covered a lot of funerals over there. And actually, I think, Alex, you might have been here with me to this one, I think. And this is at the time, this is 2010, and this is for a soldier that was killed in Afghanistan. And this is the section of the cemetery called Section 60, where all they bury all those soldiers from the Afghan war and Iraq war. And this is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is walking to the funeral. And so I didn't know who he was at the time. I just saw this officer walking through this part of the grave, and we're waiting for the funeral to start. And found out it was later that it was Michael Mullen, the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. All right, so that encompasses all the general assignment stuff I've done over the years. But in 1981, they asked me to be the exclusive photographer in the style section. Style section was, back then, it was like working in Vanity Fair. It was funny, it shrunk my territory significantly. It was like Capitol Hill, up the mall, the Smithsonian's, the White House, primarily for evening events, and Kennedy Center, anything going on at Kennedy Center, and then probably the Georgetown Party Circuit, and then New York City for things like fashion, Broadway, and a lot of movie stars and things like that. And that was it. So I spent a lot of time in New York. So this is a picture I did of a fellow named Joseph Karsh. At the time, he was considered the greatest portrait photographer in the world. And kind of intimidating to be asked to make a portrait of the greatest portrait photographer in the world. But he was a lovely man. And I gave him a print of this, and he signed it for me, and I have it hanging on my wall. I covered a lot of society and parties. This is probably one of the best pictures I made during a party, and during a Christmas party, and it was just like something called a white elephant gift exchange party, where people take their bad Christmas gifts and exchange it. But this picture ran only about 2 years ago. Again, after like this is 1981, the lady in the lower left called me up, and she said she wanted to meet me. So we met for lunch. She lives out in San Francisco. We met for lunch, and she's in her 80s now, and she wanted a copy of the print. And so we met at the Cosmos Club in Washington for lunch, where she was a guest. And she goes, "You know what? You know why that reaction on her face?" She goes, "I just had a 6-month-old child. The other friend lady, had like 3 or 4 kids, and she had older kids, and they would take them to horseback riding. And she had been doing it for a week, and she's just telling her right then, do you think you can take all the kids to horseback riding again?" That's what it is. A lot of state dinners. This is Reagan in the state dining room, and that's at the time the Prime Minister of Italy reading his remarks, and Reagan's talking to the Prime Minister's wife. So a lot of black tie events. I think I had 2 tuxedos or black ties in my closet during my years at Style. This is Reagan's second inaugural in 1984 that got canceled. And this is one of the inaugural parties in the DC Convention Center. And I'm coming down the escalator, and I see this lady in her fur coat just holding a cigarette above everybody. This is Maya Lin at the, is that in focus, anybody? Are we in focus here? We are, okay. This is the construction of the Vietnam Memorial, and Maya Lin designed it, and it was very controversial, and she was besieged by criticism, and she only gave 2 interviews, one to the Washington Post and one to 60 Minutes. And I spent the morning with her, primarily working on a portrait with her with lighting and things like that. There was a trailer on site, and she had all her plans, and I lit it. And I said, let's go outside and see this thing. And it looked ugly, and it was noontime, which was the worst time to do photography. It was in the summertime. It was white hot. My eyes were blinding off of it. And I posed her by the wall. She has her hard hat there. I made a couple frames on the film, and I said, okay, I've had enough. I just didn't think it was much of a picture. And she stepped off. I made 1 frame of her stepping off, and then still didn't think anything of it. It got buried in the files. It got buried in the paper. That picture got buried in the paper. The portrait was dominant on Style. And then 40 years later, it resurfaces. Thing about decades later, when some of this stuff resurfaces, it bowls you over. You look at this now and you go, oh my God, nobody had any idea the effect that this wall was going to have. I certainly didn't. And it's just at the time, it's just like, oh, this is pretty ugly. What can I possibly do with it? And, you know, it turned out to be pretty monumental. Sometimes you have no idea. Sometimes it takes decades for you to realize what you've been through. A lot of fashion, and back then the newspapers like the Washington Post, New York Times were, you know, we were people everybody had to deal with back then. And so we had a great fashion editor named Nina Hyde, and she back then the designers would hold private fashion shows for us. They would do dressing sessions for us. So we go up there and cover the fashion shows, but we had appointments with all designers. And this guy here, this is March 1980, this is some guy named Ralph Lipschitz, who I've never heard of. And if I'd known that Ralph Lauren would be somebody really big one day, I probably would have shot 20 rolls of film with him. But I only shot like three to six frames of this guy. So anyway. And this is a couple of years later. This is those private settings that we had. This is in Bill Blass's studio, and this is for a springtime fashion shoot. But this is the kind of stuff that the designers would do for us now. But now, you know, this kind of stuff really isn't possible anymore. There's just too much media, and they have their own media now. I did shoot a few fashion shows in Paris with Nina, and this is in the later 80s. The shows were held in the Louvre Museum, and we were waiting for the doors to open, and I shot the crowd, and this is one of my favorite pictures from my Paris shoots. Then in style, we would do a lot of entertainers, and this is Tom Jones rehearsing at the Warner Theater in 1978. Riding in a limousine with Jacqueline Bisset in 1981. Portrait session with Vincent Price. Portrait session with what's this? Come on.
Harry Belafonte.
Yeah. 1978. Kurt Vonnegut, the author, his best-selling book was Slaughterhouse-Five, and he survived as a prisoner of war, the Dresden firebombing. And he chain smoked. He smoked pell-mells and one after the other. And his cough was the most horrific cough I've ever heard in my life. And I got back to the office and my God, I said, this might be an obituary picture. This guy's not going to live another. This is 1981. He lived like 25 more years until 85. And one of his great quotes was, he said, you know, I should sue the tobacco companies because this warning on the side, you know, I should sue them over this warning because it didn't work. Chuck Yeager, man who broke the sound barrier. This is his Bell X-1 that's hanging in the museum, the Air and Space Museum in Washington. And this is 1981, right as the book The Right Stuff came out. And I met him outside and we came inside. I had all my lights and I always carried all these lights. And I look up, I was there scouting out before. I said, look, the only thing to do is to get you upstairs. And I couldn't even light it. I had a nice window light coming through. But the only way to shoot it it's about 50 feet behind him with a telephoto lens. And that compresses everything together. And then you close the aperture down to get a lot of depth of field, and then put it on a tripod. And it's about a half-second exposure to pull that off.
Nice.
This is Judge John Sirica, the Watergate judge. This was for the 10th anniversary of the Watergate break-ins, a story we did. This is in his judge's chambers. Robert McNamara, the former Secretary of Defense. And, He never talked to the press, but at one point he did, and it was right after a movie came out in 1983 called it's about nuclear war, and the whole country was shut up by it. It was on ABC, and he was president of the World Bank the day after. And he was on a panel afterwards and discussed everything. And he allowed one of our style reporters to talk to him, and he was president of the World Bank at that time. And a friend of mine, McNamara's first wife died, but his second wife lives in Middleburg. And she told a friend of mine that he saw that picture and he said, that's me. Alexander Haig up on the Hill for his Senate confirmation hearings when he was become Secretary of State. Carter's in their backyard in Plains, Georgia. And this is about 1984. I went down there. Mrs. Carter had just published her book, and President Carter already had his book out like a year or two before. But it was very interesting because Jimmy Carter seemed like a ghost to me. His Carter Center was being built, but all he really was doing was working in his wood shop and building rocking chairs. And he just really seemed ghost-like to me. And I spent most of my morning with Mrs. Carter. But I said, let's get the two of you in these rocking chairs he built. Because let's go out to his shop. And went out there and talked to him. He said, yeah, just come get me when you want to do it. And so we were still in the house, and all of a sudden I felt this thing down there. It's like, he goes, do you want me to come out now? I said, no, sir. Just give me about another half an hour to come get you. Oh, okay. And so, and I just thought he was in a real low state of mind. At least that was my opinion. But he was not the Jimmy Carter that rose up from the ashes at that point. So we sat him down in chairs, and I made two frames, click, click, and he jumps out. He goes, "Okay, thank you." And he went running back to the shop. And so then the story is really about Mrs. Carter. And then I shot this portrait of Mrs. Carter, ran with the story. So that's its style. And I went back into general assignment for a year or two, and then got into the Sunday magazine for about 3 or 4 years. And this was the old Sunday magazine before we redesigned it. But that's I would now be working with color, which back then was very difficult to shoot. It had to look good. Color had to look good. So you had to light it, and you know, the question is, you had to know what you're doing. And it takes a while to know what you're doing when you're shooting color transparencies. The film is so unforgiving, unlike black and white film. And this is shot on a view camera. Those cameras where you put the sheet over your head. It's 3 separate exposures all on one sheet of film. And it's critical exposure, and it's multiple exposures. And it's something that somebody would do in Photoshop today, but I doubt if I could ever do it again. This is, once again, it was all about lighting, and I always felt like I was always hauling around a grand piano of lighting equipment. You were nothing but a pack mule. This is Barbara Mikulski, and she's up in the Capitol. She was just elected as a senator. Not too many women senators at that time. It might have been only like the 2nd or 3rd or something. And she's from Maryland. And you know, it's, I believe this is called the President's Room. It's down below the Senate chamber. There's no power cords in there. I had to bring about 200 feet of heavy extension cord to run wire. You know, you go and you scout a location. For these things, you had to scout the location first and see what you needed. And you set it all up. You have an assistant with you, and you test the lighting on the assistant. You make a Polaroid and see, and then these people don't have all day to stand for you. They come and stand for about 5 minutes. and you got to pull it off. This is, oh, shucks. This is Robert Gallo of the NIH. He shares the credit for discovering the AIDS virus, which is a very controversial thing because the French claim they do, and he kept on trying to grab the saying, well, me too, me too. And I think finally, this is 1986, I think finally after all these years, there's when you read about it, it's still vague. But he posed for a portrait of me with some kind of a thing showing kind of a scan of the AIDS virus. And once again, it's all about planning and lighting, and it's kind of my mind draws a blank now on how I even pulled it off. I did travel with a lot of people. This is Bill Bradley. He's flying up to New Jersey. We're on New York Air, which some of you remember, you know, $39 each way, and they give you a bagel and a cup of coffee. And I spent 2 days with him in New Jersey, and just driving around the state with him. And then the second day we drove over to New York so he could attend a conference at the Waldorf Astoria. And he drove, and we went through the Lincoln Tunnels during rush hour, and he knew all these back roads. And the next thing you know, we end up like right at the entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel. I go, how did you do that? You know, he went right in. Oops, uh-oh. Oh no, this is not good, or is it? All right, I have to read. I hit the wrong thing. All right, let's see what we can do here. I'm gonna have to click on this one and click on the Apple A. Or no, it's hit, yeah, shift. There we go. And then Command L, and then start. There we go. Okay, so this is in Waterloo, Iowa, with Jack Kemp, who was running, who was going to run for president in 1988. And this is what you call one of these rubber chicken dinner circuit things. And I flew in a Learjet with him, like from Washington to Seattle, and then from Seattle to Iowa, and then back again. And it was just me and his press aide. And the most incredible picture, you know, this is the thing, do you ask or not ask? And he's sitting there in his, he had like kind of his own lounge chair in the plane. And he's there with his shoes off, coat off, tie, really good. Feet up, socks, eating this gigantic bag of Cheetos. And I said, man, that's a great picture. And he goes, think so? He goes, here, hang on a minute, just give me a minute. And he puts away the Cheetos, puts the shoes on. So, and I thought, you know, it's like, don't ask. And so, and so I ran into his daughter lives over in Middleburg, and a friend introduced me, and I told her this story, and she goes, I know you're telling the truth because dad loves his Cheetos. Okay, so one trip the magazine sent me to was to do a safari. It was 3 weeks in the continent of Africa, the country of Zambia, to do just a travel piece on going on safari. And this is a park ranger taking me around early in the morning, and he's got an elephant gun with him. And he would take people on walking tours. And this is just one of the pictures I made during that trip. So this is you know, with the magazine, this kind of shows the complex lighting equipment that I had. Not normally the camera I use. That's a gigantic 8x10 view camera, which I had, and I'll show you some things I did with it. But it just shows the kind of setup that you have to do. And here's the food shot I did with the magazine. Can't see her face up there, unfortunately. This is the wife of the French ambassador. And this took 4 hours to set everything up. This was to illustrate her recipe for tomato basil soup. And it's anyway. So while I was in the magazine, they said, look, we know you can shoot color really well with all the lighting and everything. We got something we really got to pull off here. So this is me in the cabinet room at the White House. And every year they did these all metropolitan high school teams that they would put the picture in the paper. Well, they wanted, and Reagan agreed to pose with the all metropolitan high school basketball team. And so I went over there. I knew the White House photographers, and they took me around. We looked for locations, and we decided on this cabinet room. And they allowed us in 4 hours early. I came over with Bill O'Leary right there and Bill Snead, and I dropped them off at the White House with all this equipment. Well, I parked the car, and we took all those chairs out and put them out in the hallway, and then set up all this lighting for 3 minutes with the president. And there it is. And once I saw the film develop, I could sleep at night again. This is one thing you don't want to screw up, period. So this is what that big camera, the 8x10 camera, that's the size of the film. It's massive. And when I was on Sunday Magazine, I had a lot of time on my hands to do things the way I wanted to. So I decided to do a lot of stuff on 8x10 and go around the city and shoot things. So here I am in the East Room of the White House with the 8x10, and I'm going to shoot a Reagan press conference. I got it all set up. And this press aide, the number 2 or 3 press aide who handled the photographers, came up and said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm suddenly going, you can't have that here. And that's the thing about Washington. It's like, you can't have that here. So, I said, no, it's a camera, just like everything else. It's film and camera. No, you can't have that here. I said, get up here and put the blanket over you. You take a look. And he gets up there. And he comes out and peers behind. He says, can I have one? Can I have a print when you're done? I said, absolutely. It's the way he said it. Can I have one? So here it is, 8x10, Reagan during the press conference. You have to keep the film speed. The film speed is, the faster the film, the more the color starts falling apart. So that's the other thing about lighting, everything. You guys shoot slow film back then for the good color. And this film is balanced for tungsten light. If you shot this film outside, it'd be completely blue, but tungsten lighting, it's perfect. It's balanced for that. And I did push it a stop, but it was ASA 64. I pushed it to 125. But the exposure still was 1 second long. And what I realized was that, wait a second, and then you study it for a long time. You go, wait a minute, when people are asking him questions, everybody in the room is still. So you wait for that, and then you do your 1 second exposure. And then I took it up to the top of the Lincoln Memorial and got there at 8 o'clock in the morning. It was relatively easy back then in the 80s to deal with the Park Service. We knew the PR guy very well. Everybody knew him well. No big deal. Dead center. Got there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Brought a friend with me. I dropped him off with all the stuff and parked my car. Three of the things we carried up there were these 1-gallon paint cans filled with concrete that I could clamp onto each leg of the tripod to make sure it would hold absolutely still. And it's a double exposure where at 6 o'clock in the evening, I underexposed the film to get the general ambiance of the crowd. And then at 9:30 or so, I took a spot meter reading off the Washington Monument, and it gave me a 16 second exposure. Now the film is this big thing you slide in the back and then you pull a dark slide out. Once I shot that first exposure, I didn't put the dark slide back and you didn't want to move the camera at all. And it just covered it with the focusing cloth and it just stayed there like that. The only thing I changed was the shutter speed. You don't even want to touch it much. And so when the fireworks went up, you got to let them clear the Washington Monument, otherwise the streaks will cover the Washington Monument. Then it gets up there and explodes, and a lot of times there's no color in the explosion. So you got, yeah, that's color, and you have the lens open, you have that dark slide over the lens, and when you say, oh, that's color, you go 1001, 1002, 1003. Okay, now I have 13 seconds left. And then you just keep counting until you count your 16 seconds. Close the shutter, put the dark slide back in, and you're done. You know, like 14 hours worth of work for one single piece of film. So I did a lot of interior design work also, all throughout. Even when I was in sports, they brought me back to do a lot of stuff for this local living section. But starting in the Sunday magazine, I did a lot of interior design work. And here's one here where you can, overlooking the Capitol Dome. You're there all day shooting all these rooms with lights, with all those lights. But the moment I walked in this place and saw the dome through there, I knew that in the evening, that would be the picture I shot. And this is a picture for Christmas dinner, all lit by candlelight. All right, what are we in? Okay, sports. So for the past 35 years, I shot sports. And this is Mike Sellers when his rookie season, and he's it's a summer training camp, extremely hot, and the trainer is hosing him down. This is the very first NFL game I covered 50 years ago this month, and that's Billy Kilmer against the Dallas Cowboys. And it's Fred Stokes, defensive end, sacking the Denver quarterback, Kubiak. The pictures were clean back then. Now it's hard to get good pictures. The athletes are so fast, they just clump together too much. It's amazing. This is, oh, shucks. His name escapes me. He was on the Dallas Cowboys, but he became a Redskins in '78 or so. This is during a preseason game where he got injured. He's a tight end. He'll come to me afterwards. I'll shout it out. This is Joe Gibbs' very first game as head coach of the Redskins. They put me on him strictly. Said, do nothing but photograph Gibbs. This is 1981. Now, this is a wire transmission from 1984 from the Associated Press. This is in Foxborough, Mass. It's Sullivan Stadium. This is Boston Patriots, and that's John Riggins running. And the Associated Press and the United Press International back then would have these dark rooms where they would develop your black and white film, make prints. Then you'd have to call the Bell telephone system and ask them, pay them $300 in 1984 in the dark room for you so you could transmit your pictures. And so this is what the transmitter looked like, both AP and UPI. Both had these transmitters. The picture would spin and an optical light would scan. And it took 8 minutes for the transmission of each picture. I like to, if I get a chance, that you really will always want to stay where the ball is, but the linemen, the both defensive and offensive linemen don't get much credit when they really should get most of the credit. And this is one of the defensive linemen, Jason Hatcher, crushing through the Giants line. And this kind of sums up what it was like covering Washington for the past 25 years. I think I felt exactly the same way. And, it's just, they were always losing. They were once a great team. And just, they could never pull it together. This is this FedEx Field, and there was a massive blizzard in 2009, and this is on a Sunday, and they had a Monday night football game scheduled. They had to clear out the snow. It was all done by hand, the entire thing. They would shovel this stuff. You can see a crew working way over in the right side. They would have these chutes that they would set up, and all the stuff would come sliding down from upstairs. They'd knock it down to the lower part, and then it all goes down on the field. And then front end loaders would scoop it up and take it out to dump trucks and everything. All that football of NFL, college, and everything else, the best action picture I ever made was in a high school game. And the reason is severe weather. Severe weather really enhances the picture. It really, some of your best pictures are in the bad weather with sports. Just adds so much to it. And this was a late September, and it was a tropical storm came through, and every single football game was canceled that night except this one school. And the way the team won the game was one team had the punt from its end zone, and they fumbled the punt, and somebody landed on it, and it was a 6-0 game. And that field was destroyed for years. Now this is Frank Beamer of Virginia Tech. They had just joined the ACC back in like 2004. And they played University of Miami for the ACC championship down in the Orange Bowl. And he won it. And what this picture says to me is that you used to always get people carrying their coaches and celebrating. That's all gone out the window because immediately somebody either will douse the coach with the Gatorade, and immediately the TV network will grab the coach and interview him right away. And you just don't get these moments anymore like that. Nobody carries the coach off the field anymore. One of the last assignments I did before I left the post was went out to Hawaii to Lahaina that was destroyed by the fires, and spent a couple of days with the football team who got back together, and we're going to play their very first home game. And here they are lined up after football practice during sunset, singing their school song. They rehearsed their school song. It's all done in the native language. Baseball, the Orioles were our team for many years when we didn't have teams, and we would go to the old stadium and cover it. Cal Ripken breaking Lou Gehrig's record. I had a chance. This is Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh to me is the prettiest baseball stadium because the cityscape is right in the background. And I was in Pittsburgh for a couple of days covering the hockey playoffs with the Capitals, and I had a day off, and I called over and asked if I could photograph the game. And I really just wanted to go over. I knew that it was going to be an evening game. The lighting would be perfect on the city. And this picture I made with an iPhone. There's another iPhone picture. This is down in Savannah, Georgia. We're doing a story on minor league baseball. And it's during the national anthem, and the rain had just let up and a rainbow came out. One of the best fan pictures I've made. Now here, Max Scherzer is one of the most intense people I've ever run across. And here he is pitching in, you can, first of all, you can see the stress on a pitcher's arm. You see how that arm is twisting like that at full velocity. And you wonder, you know, everybody ends up with surgery now, just about everybody. And this is during the playoffs against the Dodgers when the year they won the World Series. And he pitched 7 innings, and he comes, and so it's raining, and he comes, but the next picture shows his intensity. Alex, you were probably right here when this happened. And it's like, he comes in, and this is Max Scherzer. And it's like, he just finished 7 complete innings, and then there you go. That's Max Scherzer. This is during the World Series. Robles is in center field, and this is down in Houston during Game 1. Bryce Harper posing once it's lit with lights again. This is in spring training, and every year we would get some kind of a player to pose for us for our baseball issue. But I found Bryce Harper probably one of the best guys ever to be around in baseball. I mean, when I see them booing him when he comes back to Philadelphia from Philly, you know, he's one of the nicest people I've ever met. Absolutely. It's just, he knew photography was part of the game, and he was great for pictures. And here they are celebrating, I think after maybe a winning their very first game to get into, they've been playing Milwaukee in one game to get into the playoffs for that World Series year. They all wear goggles because they don't want to sting their eyes. They got to play a game the next night, so they want to be blinded by us. This stuff, there's like a ½ inch of beer and champagne on the floor. So the stuff's everywhere. And this is how you have to dress. I'm wearing a pair of goggles also. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's beyond description. So this is in the basketball. This is Michael Jordan in Chicago. The second day he became a pro. He's in training camp. And I was up there photographing baseball playoffs because the Chicago Cubs had made the playoffs for the first time in 50 years, and every single newspaper went crazy and sent every single newspaper in the entire country sent their sports staff and their photographers up there to cover it. And I get a call and said, while you're up there, run up to this high school in North Chicago and shoot Michael Jordan. He just arrived there for training camp. And I get up there, it's this beat up old dark high school. And the NBA was not that massive of an enterprise in 1984. This is Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were building the modern NBA, but this guy launched them into the stratosphere. And it was just so dark in there. And, you know, where's Michael Jordan? He's over there shooting foul shots. And I go over and introduce myself. He said, well, let me just finish up the foul shots. And you know, so I just hung around. Anytime the ball came down, I'd grab it and feed it over to him and everything. It's too dark to shoot. I didn't have any lights with me or anything, but I did see a beautiful big window out in the hallway. And I brought him out there, and he was wearing just a beat up old white t-shirt. And I said, could you take the shirt off? And he goes, sure. And so I brought a stool out and had him prop his leg up, and this window it's what's known as Rembrandt lighting. You know, it's the kind of light that Rembrandt used with windows. And I just shot this portrait of him. And, you know, once again, it's like the Vietnam Wall. You had no idea at that time, no idea. And there he is in Chicago in 1997, beating the Bullets with 55 points during the playoffs. And I remember I don't know if he made it up or whatever, but they said he had the flu and wasn't going to play. So here he is playing, and he scored 55 points. College basketball, and Maryland Duke was always a great game to see. And I mean, really, once all these leagues started changing, you know, you just don't have that energy anymore. This is in Chicago for the Midwest Regionals of the March Madness tournament, and it just it's showing you just all the photographers on the floor with all their equipment. It's insane. This is Georgetown. They were the year before, they were in the Final Four, and everybody thought they were going to repeat. And they got knocked out in the very first game. And the NCAA allows access to the locker room for photographers during these tournaments. And I walked in there. I made sure I was the very first one in there because there's TV crews lined up behind me. And I knew once they saw people coming in so I was the very first one in, and this is how they were. And this is the University of Virginia when they went on to win the national championship in Minnesota. This is the semifinal game when they beat Auburn at the last minute at the buzzer. Hockey, Mike Green slamming into the wall. It's a very fast game. I mean, there's two of the great players. It's Wilson on the left of the Capitals, who's known as the tough guy, and Sidney Crosby of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Ovechkin. This is during the Stanley Cup playoffs, the finals against Vegas, and this is in Washington. Washington beat them something like 7-0 or 7-2, and I was upstairs, and I just said, "Well, I found this guy in the crowd, and said I'm just going to stay on him. I know we're going to score another goal." And so I just stayed on. This is right as Washington scored another goal. This is in Las Vegas, and this is you'd be there for a day or two, and you would cover the afternoon practices and everything, or the morning practices, and you would send back a ton of pictures. And so this is in my hotel room as I'm editing through the day's take and sending back pictures. And then there's the Stanley Cup finally. It was in Las Vegas. Game 5, and they were constantly texting you saying, "We need, the game just ended." They said, "We need a picture of Ovechkin with the cup. The edition's closing. It's going to be 8-column picture." And you text back, "Well, they haven't even brought out the Stanley Cup yet." And so then, 5 minutes later, "Where's Ovechkin the cup?" Well, then finally it's like 5 minutes. It's closing. I said, "Well, he's, he finally gets the cup and skates around the rink with it like this. And I'm up top, and Jonathan Newton's across the way. And either one of us is going to get it. I mean, it's going to be between one of us." And it comes around, and it's like, "Oh my God, that's it right there, right there." And then he finally comes over here, and that's when I shot that. And you immediately just take the card out of the camera, you have your computer right there. You load it in, I'm thinking, okay, that picture where he's right there was everything. So you bring it up on the screen, and there he is coming right at you with the cup. But this is Las Vegas, and there's a woman who lifted her shirt up and exposed her naked breast right up against the glass, right behind them. So you go, "Well, I can't use that one." And they're screaming, "Where's the picture? Where's the picture?" So here it is. All right, so a lot of women's sports that we cover, high schools, all kinds of. This is field hockey, women's lacrosse, girls and limit. If they're in high school, it's girls lacrosse. If it's in college, it's women's lacrosse. And here's your parent. This is down at a state championship down in way down in Southwest Virginia, and her team's losing. Girls softball is like a chess game. It really is interesting. It's very hard to score when you have two good teams with two good pitchers, and especially like in a state championship, it's very hard to even score in these games. Somebody's got to make a mistake for somebody to win. The professional women's basketball league, I taught that this year. This is Washington Mystics, and they never give up. I mean, they leave everything on the floor. It's a very physical game, and you can see this young lady here has to wear a face mask. Maryland's women's basketball when they won the ACC championship. Stonebridge girls volleyball team when they beat Loudoun County. Loudoun County was a volleyball powerhouse for many years, and so This was just a regular season game, but they just beat the best volleyball team for the last 2 decades. And this is Women's World Cup out in Pasadena in 1999. And this is the game where the woman lifted her shirt up and showed her sports bra and everything. That made every front page. But what everybody forgot was that goalie right there that everybody's mobbing over is the one who saved the game. Golf, best golf picture I made was on the practice range. And once again, rather than the main event, just keep looking around. This is Nick Fido in the foreground, and back is Phil Mickelson, who's left-handed. And I kept noticing that this rhythm that they were doing while they're hitting on the practice tees. And then over the years, I have photographed Tiger Woods quite a bit, but this is out at Congressional Country Club. Might be a U.S. Open, but I noticed that he was, the crowds follow him everywhere. And over on the 7th tee, it's a par 3, so it's a very short course, and the crowds just completely circled. So the next day, I got over to 17th early, wait for him to come. And I told the marshals, I said, I'm gonna, you can be 1 arm length inside the rope as a photographer. I said, I'm gonna lay down here, from here up, I'm in. He goes, and I'm gonna make this ground level shot. And so I'm laying there, and then the crowd guys are around, and I got people packed in all around me, and people are straddling over me like this. And then Woods and his caddy comes up, and they both look at me. And Woods turns to his caddy, and the caddy says, "Not in the backswing, right?" And I said, "Absolutely," because the last thing you want to do with golfer is in the backswing. I said, "Absolutely not." He goes, "Fine." And so all I really wanted was him just teeing up there like that. This is the Preakness, and you're out in weather all the time. You dress for you go to stores that sell stuff to the professionals. The hat is bought in Seattle at a fisherman's supply store several weeks. You go to places that sell construction equipment, the people that work out on construction jobs. That's where I buy a lot of my stuff, because you're out in the elements all the time. And for the Preakness, you have to get up 4 o'clock in the morning, and by 8 o'clock, you have to have your remote camera in place. And yeah, here it is pouring rain, and it rained all day. Here's the picture I got from that. Covered a couple Olympics, I think 4. The 2 best were the Norway in Lillehammer, opening ceremonies here. This is on the ski slopes for the men's downhill, and you can see I'm wearing spikes on my boots and everything. It's probably 10 below, 20 below zero. And I found out that the camera I had wasn't adequate enough to photograph downhill skiing. And the real pros had these high-speed cameras that cost $20,000 back then. This is 1994, and those cameras shot 10 frames a second of film. And nowadays my camera shoots 20 frames a second, but back then that was a lot. And I went out the day before and did a trial run where they did practice runs down the slopes, and I looked at the film and I didn't have any guys. My film, as I shot the motor drive, they went between the frames. And so I get up there and I think, all right, I'm gonna have to figure this out. And so you'll see there's they disappear. So when you see them come down the hill way up there, and the moment they disappear, you start counting. You count 1001, 1002, and at 1015, they pop up there in the midair. And at 1015, just with 1 frame, you go click. And that's how I pulled it off. I mean, and that's Tommy Moe, who won the gold. So they said that, okay, all the old pros told me, they said, look, after the first 15 skiers come down, don't even bother making pictures, because it's going to be in the first 15, because the track gets all worn down and nobody can get the right speed anymore. And so I came back with this with 15 frames on a 36 exposure roll. And I had every single skier.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. And also, so this is the big drama, and they had us in seats. And so when she came over there, I tried to stand up, because, oh my God. And there was some guy behind me with the camera, and, he took his camera and smashed it on my head. So I wouldn't stand up. So I got the people in the way, but still, it's one of the big moments. Barcelona Olympics, just a scene setter in the stadium, the men's 800-meter dash. This woman just finished the 5,000-meter run, and their shoes are so razor paper thin that after running 5,000 meters, their feet are on fire. And she finished the race, and she came down. She immediately stopped and ripped her shoes off and started screaming because her feet were burning up on her. This is Carl Lewis, who was the big Olympic star back then, and he's winning his fourth gold medal of the final race of the track and field of the 4x100. So this gave me a lot of chances, especially in sports. I went everywhere in the country. I've been to like 40 countries on my own. 8 of those countries the Post sent me to. But in 2000, I made it to all 50 states. And all these pins are where I've been all over the country. And there's about 600 pins on there. But somewhere around 2005 or so, I realized that I was about 10 cities shy of being in every state capital in the United States. And so I made that a quest to get every state capital. And the last one being it's pronounced Pierre, South Dakota, not Pierre. And it's one of the most out of the way places to get to. And when you look up for an airline ticket, it's like, $2,500 to get there. And so the travel section wanted me to do a story on this. And with the iPhone, when I went to a lot of these state capitals, I'd shoot a bunch of stuff on my iPhone. I can't travel with a bunch of camera equipment, but it's all heavy and packed up. And the moment you unpack it, it's just, you're afraid you'll lose stuff, and it's just too inconvenient. But I was able to shoot a lot of stuff on the iPhone as I went to these state capitals. And so I had enough material, and they said, well, we really want you to do, and I said, well, I got one more. And I said, okay, we'll send you there. And I just decided the best way to go is to fly into Omaha and drive 6 hours. Driving 6 hours out there is like driving from here to New York. I mean, there's no cars on the road most of the time. And it happened to be the 4th of July. And when I got to the state capitol in here, I got there just in time to set up for the 4th of July fireworks at the state capitol. And they did a 2-page spread. You got the pier, and then you have my favorite capital is Santa Fe. It's just a massive art gallery. It's all it is. It's amazing. To the left down there is Sacramento, and it's the official portrait of Jerry Brown, and it's hung up in almost like a back closet up on the 3rd floor. It looks like a kindergartner did it. It's amazing. Then that's Wyoming right there with the first woman magistrate in the country, the statue of her. And then there's a panorama that I shot of Montpelier, Vermont. And when I shot that, it was 27 below zero. Up top is Louisiana and Baton Rouge, and that's Huey Long's grave right there. Right, Huey Long, right? And so the other picture on the middle right is the Virginia state capitol. I shot it during the inauguration. After the inauguration was over, just with the stand and all the bunting and everything. And unfortunately, I used 2 pictures from the state capitol of Nebraska, which is a phenomenal place. And it has Nebraska is unique because it doesn't have a House and Senate. It only has one chamber. And it's called a unicameral, I believe is how you pronounce it. They did a detailed door. They told me they would have used my Alaska one if it had been in color, but it wouldn't have reproduced well in black and white. So that's the state capitals, and we're just about done here, folks. So this is the last football game. I did. Jonathan Newton shot this of me in Los Angeles, and this is last December. And in my life now, everything kind of runs in half centuries, and this is when I started. There you go, folks.
We have a tradition here because we don't charge a passing hat. It's not a hat, it's two baskets. That's where we always use St. James for our lectures. While you're filling that, it's our chance to ask John questions. You want to take it? All righty. Thank you.
Oh, change. Oh, right. You mean everybody has a cell phone in their hand. So you're saying how does the cell phone change getting a good crowd shot because everybody's there? And it does, and it does. For example, the coach of the hockey team, he's got fans sitting behind him, and or even if you shoot a player on the bench doing stuff, those people are behind them. So here's this intense picture of a player or a coach or something on the bench. And here's all these people, it's during a timeout or something. There's all these people just looking down at their cell phones. It really does factor into it because it shows that the fans aren't engaged at all, yet something really intense is happening in front of them. Yeah, very, very good question, but they're everywhere. As a matter of fact, I have a picture here. First of all, there's probably 100 or 200,000 pictures that I shot. I know I've had about 100,000 pictures published. We added it up, and there's one picture that I purposely shot. It was Ted Kennedy's funeral procession, and I was assigned just to be on, I believe, was it Pennsylvania or Constitution Avenue. And I was just at a corner. It's just to shoot the crowds, and it's in here on this computer. And that was like 2007, right in 2007. The iPhone was introduced in 2007. And there's the crowd. I never even saw the procession go by. It just stayed on I never saw it. I just stayed on the procession. And some people have the little digital cameras, the consumer digital cameras, but most people are watching the parade. And if that picture would be shot today, every single person, I'll get you later, Fred. Today, every single person would have an iPhone now, every single one. Good question. Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, I remember one of the photos, I think it was on Facebook, I think it was, this space craft was coming in and a bald eagle was going by at the same time. How did you get that shot without being loved?
Wait, what was the picture again?
It's like, you were filming something at a game or something down in Georgetown.
Okay.
And I think the spaceship was coming in and the bald eagle was going by at the same time.
I actually don't remember that picture, but whatever it would be luck. Total luck, always. And the other thing is, once again, now we have these cameras with 20 frames a second. You get stuff that you would never have before. Ma'am? Oh, there you go. Yeah, hi.
Did you grow up reading Life magazine or?
Yes.
what inspired you?
Yes, well, Life, National Geographic, still work, Life, National Geographic. And the life photographers are all my heroes, and I got to meet a lot of them, got to know a lot of them too, and all the geographic photographers I got to know very well. Any published picture was an inspiration. You know, you would study it and you would then try to get to meet as many of the photographers you can and talk to them about everything. But yeah, always. And then, for example, one thing I keep on talking about, I can't find it anymore, it's somewhere around the house, is the Life magazine year in pictures. And I bought it at Edwards. I can still remember the stack this high at Edwards Pharmacy in Percival. I mean, and on the front was the picture shot of just the Earth from Apollo 8. And it's the first time we'd ever seen the Earth like that. And then when you open up the spread, it was a two-page spread of the Earthrise over the moon. And it was just like, oh my God. I mean, it's just, nothing can beat something like that. But yeah, Life magazine was a big inspiration. And there's a set of books that the Life magazine put out, was called the photography series. When you got all the books, it was that thick on the bookshelf. And every single possible thing that you needed to know about photography explained to you by all those photographers. I still have them. And we had them in the dark room at the Loudoun Valley. And, you know, you look through those every day. Absolutely. Anybody? Yes, way up there.
What's your favorite subject just for your own personal enjoyment?
I don't know. It's just anything. You know, anything's a possible, great, interesting photograph. Anything. I mean, it just could be, you know, these glasses laying on the paper, if all of a sudden some nice light came in and cast a big shadow. And the thing about the iPhone is that, you know, the iPhone's right there. If you see that right now, you can get it. And I got more pictures that I never would have gotten because of this. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Tell a story about the iPhone being with you at Wizard People.
I do. I did have that. As a matter of fact, on here, I do have the front page picture. Well, I was covering the playoffs at Wrigley Field and trying to think what happened. I got out to the stadium. This is probably 2016 or 17. So I shot the first game, and the next game, it was raining all day. And we didn't know if it was going to be rain out, but it turned out it was going to be rain out. And I was inside the photo workroom the whole time, sheltering myself because it was nasty out there. And I realized, before they called the game, and I saw that people were sitting in the stands all covered up. And before they called the game, people were still sitting out in the stands. I thought, okay, no big deal. And then I realized, they're probably going to call this game and I'm going to need a front page picture for the sports section. And so I go out there and let me go out and look. And I didn't take my equipment with me. And I see there might be like 3 people left in the whole stadium. And I see this family get up and leave. And I took this thing out and shot them coming across. And it tells everything. It's a beautiful picture. And it ran huge on the front of sports. These things can reproduce beautifully now. I mean, it saved me. If those were the only people left in the stadium. Yes, Lucy.
Did you ever get Joe Namath?
Never did. Never saw him. Never met him. No, not at all. Oh, Cassie.
With these games with all this intensity and this, did you pick it up or were you an observer? I mean, with all of this testosterone.
Right, well, good point. I mean, being around Max Scherzer, it kind of rubs off. I mean, that guy, it does rub off a bit. I mean, when the team is winning and doing well, it does rub off a bit. And, you know, and it rubs off on the whole city and on the whole population. It does. Dana,
Deb Chamber showed me a portrait of you one time and you took it, but it was of your cast shadow. But you knew it was you because there were cameras everywhere, all around, you, but it's all part of your cast shadow.
I mean, you know, it's funny, I mean, I've been carrying these things around for well over 50 years. I mean, they're still hanging off of me. I actually, honest to God, I think the thing that saved me, it's kind of a best kept secret, really, is that I did shoot sports for as long as I did, because when I really stopped and thought about it was basketball, I'm sitting down the entire time. The cameras, I'm not walking around with the cameras hanging on me all day long. Like hockey, you're primarily confined to one camera shooting through a hole. You're sitting down, nothing's hanging off of you. You're not walking around with these things all day long. Baseball, you're in these photo pits and you can set cameras down and you're not walking around with them hanging around you all day long. And then football, you do have to have them hanging around you, but there's times where you're sitting in one spot for a while and it's only for about 3 hours. But a lot of photographers do walk around with cameras all day long. And a lot of people I worked with on the staff of the Post, much younger than me, you know, had to take time out for back surgery and things like that. I mean, knock on wood. I mean, and I think sports saved me. Even though I carry all this big stuff, I set it down a lot. I'm not walking with it all day. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yes. As a matter of fact, I got a picture of you doing the shot put. Now, is there any others?
How did you stay on technology? We're same age and so much.
Well, I can't. I mean, I had to, this thing was malfunctioning. I had to ask real experts to come up here and fix this for me. It's so hard. It keeps changing. It just keeps changing. And, you know, that whole saying about Moore's Law, how things just keep changing, like at the time it was like every 18 months. Well, that's even been compressed. But it's just a challenge. But you just try to keep that foundation of the basics that you learn, you know, even though the technology is changing, everything you've learned. I mean, it's amazing what you learn from the old timers over the years, you know, with the guys that had to make one picture at a time. When I first got to the Post, there was a fellow that got there in 1935 named Charles Delvecchio, and he was there for 1 year before he retired, but he came in one day from 3 assignments. And, you know, in the closet, we had these big packs of Kodak black and white film Tri-X wrapped in 20 boxes wrapped in this plastic. And there was 36 exposures and then there was 20 exposures. And all the old timers used the 20 exposure rolls and all the us new guys used the 36 exposure rolls. And Charlie came in after 3 assignments. He started in the morning with it was a Friday. The next day was a real estate section, and he shot a picture of an apartment building. And it was early morning, so it's beautiful. You know, it's just a beautiful masterpiece that he shot. And then he photographed a film actress for the style section. And then he went over to St. John's High School and shot the Catholic school football championship. And he came in and he took out a 20 exposure roll of film and developed it, and he laid it out on the light table, and there were 16 frames on it. And from the next day in the paper, he had the front of the real estate section, 8 columns wide, beautiful shot of this apartment building. Looked like an architectural photographer shot it. And the style ran pictures really huge. He had this beautiful picture of a movie actress. And then on page 3 of the sports section, he had a really big picture of the game-winning touchdown, the halfback diving over like this right at you with the quarterback with his arms raised, all on 16 frames. I mean, it was amazing what to learn from these guys. And the fellow on top of the Lincoln Memorial, Arthur Ellis, he, there was no flash bulb. There's no such thing as a flash bulb and stuff. It was flash powder. You see them in the movies where these guys pop these things off. And Arthur one time lit up a parade in Washington and put flash powder all along the gutters of these buildings and it blew the gutters off of it. You only have one time. I'd say,